My father-in-law grabbed my shoulder at his retirement party and told everyone, "This is the one who got lucky." He did it every single time. Every barbecue, every holiday, every birthday party, every family event where there were people I hadn't met before. My father-in-law, Dwight, would walk me over to whoever was new and say the same thing. "This is Connie. She's the one who got lucky." Then he'd squeeze my shoulder and laugh, and whoever he was introducing me to would laugh too, because what else do you do when a loud man makes a joke at someone else's expense? He'd been doing it since the wedding. 4 years of being introduced as the person who won the lottery by marrying his son. My husband, Reggie, never said anything about it. The first time I told him it bothered me, he said his dad was just being playful. The second time I brought it up, he said I was reading into it. The third time he said that's just how his dad is. That's just how he is. The 4 most dangerous words in any family because they can excuse anything forever. The thing about Dwight is that he didn't just say it to be funny. He meant it. He believed his son was the prize and I was the winner, and every room we walked into needed to know the scoreboard. Reggie was a project manager at a construction firm. He made good money, and I never once said otherwise. But I was the one who paid off my student loans 2 years early. I was the one who got promoted to regional director at my company last year. I was the one whose salary paid for the down payment on our house while Reggie covered the monthly mortgage. We were a team. But Dwight didn't see a team. Dwight saw his son carrying a woman who should be grateful every day that she got picked. The retirement party was at Dwight's brother's house. Big backyard, maybe 50 people. Dwight had worked at the same plant for 31 years, and this was his send-off. He was in a great mood, which meant he was louder than usual. I was standing by the drinks table talking to Reggie's cousin Pauline when Dwight appeared with 2 men I'd never seen before. He grabbed my shoulder the way he always did. Not hard, but firm enough that you couldn't walk away without making it a thing. "Gentlemen, this is Connie. She's the one who got lucky." The 2 men smiled politely. One of them said, "Nice to meet you." Dwight kept going because tonight was his night and he had a bigger audience than usual. I tell her all the time, my son could have had anybody. Doctors, lawyers. He picked her, and she knows it. He said she knows it while looking right at me, like I was supposed to nod, like I was supposed to agree in front of strangers that I was the lesser half of my own marriage. Pauline looked at her drink. The 2 men looked uncomfortable. I had a choice. I could smile the way I'd smiled for 4 years and let it go, or I could stop smiling. I stopped smiling. "Dwight, can I ask you something?" He still had his hand on my shoulder. He was grinning because he figured I was going to play along the way I always played along. "You've been introducing me like that for 4 years, every single event, so I want to make sure I understand what you mean." His grin got a little smaller. "It's a joke, Connie. Lighten up." I didn't lighten up. "You said your son could have had anybody. Doctors, lawyers, but he picked me. So what I'm hearing is that I'm the worst option who got the best deal." The 2 men took a step back. Pauline looked up from her drink. Dwight dropped his hand off my shoulder. "I didn't say worst option. I said he could have had anybody." "Right. And he chose me, which in your version means I got lucky. Not that he got lucky. Not that we both did. Just me." Dwight's face shifted from amused to annoyed. "You're making a big thing out of nothing." I kept my voice even. "I make more money than your son. I paid the down payment on our house. I put myself through school with no help from anyone. And every time you introduce me to a new person, you tell them I'm the one who got lucky, like I showed up to this family with nothing, and your son did me a favor by letting me in. So I need you to stop." Dwight looked around for Reggie the way he always looked for Reggie when he wanted backup. Reggie was standing about 10 feet away. He'd heard everything. Dwight waited for his son to come over and smooth it out, to say she didn't mean it like that, or to make a joke to cut the tension. Reggie put his hands in his pockets. He didn't move. That was new. Dwight looked back at me. "I was paying you a compliment." I shook my head. "You were paying your son a compliment. You were paying me an insult. And you've been doing it for 4 years, and I'm telling you now in the same public way you've been telling everyone else. Stop." Dwight didn't say anything for about 5 seconds, which was the longest I'd ever seen him go without talking. He turned around and walked toward the house without saying another word, and the 2 men he'd been introducing me to both started mumbling about checking something by the grill and disappeared in under 10 seconds. Pauline touched my arm and leaned in close and told me she was proud of me. My hands were shaking, so I put them in my pockets, but I didn't regret what I said, not even a little bit. Reggie walked over and asked if we could talk privately, so I followed him into Dan's empty kitchen where he leaned against the counter and told me he knew his dad was wrong, but I embarrassed him at his own retirement party. I stared at him because I couldn't believe that was the first thing out of his mouth. I told him I'd been embarrassed at every family event for 4 years, and he never seemed to care about that. He admitted he'd always known his dad's comments bothered me, but didn't think it was that serious. I explained that dismissing my feelings for 4 years was exactly why I had to speak up publicly since private conversations went nowhere, and I reminded him about every time I'd brought it up and he'd brushed it off or defended his dad. His face changed and I could see him putting it together, realizing he'd chosen his father's comfort over my dignity every single time. The drive home was completely silent until he said his mom called crying because I ruined his dad's special day. I told him his dad had ruined my dignity at every gathering for 4 years, and one uncomfortable party didn't compare. Over the next week, family members kept calling with their opinions. His uncle Dan said I had a point, but my timing was off. Evan sent a text saying someone needed to say something years ago. I called my best friend Karen and told her everything, and she said she was amazed I'd stayed quiet as long as I did, and that I should have done it years ago. Talking to someone who completely supported me helped because I'd been feeling guilty about causing drama. Reggie suggested we go to his parents' house to smooth things over, and I told him I was willing to talk, but wasn't apologizing for setting a boundary I should have set years ago. We went Monday evening, and Dwight was in his recliner barely looking at me. Jenny did most of the talking, saying family was important and we needed to move past this. I said I was happy to move forward once Dwight agreed to stop introducing me that way. Dwight said he was just joking, and I was too sensitive. I responded that 4 years of the same lame joke at my expense wasn't joking. It was bullying. The word hung in the air and Jenny shifted uncomfortably, but Reggie didn't contradict me, didn't defend his dad, which was something at least. Dwight's jaw tightened and he said I was being dramatic, and should know by now he doesn't mean anything personal. I told him the fact that he doesn't think about whether his words are personal was exactly the problem. He stood up saying he wasn't going to be lectured in his own house, and when Reggie asked him to just listen, Dwight said he'd been retired 3 days and already his family was turning on him. I told Jenny I wasn't leaving until Dwight agreed to stop, and he laughed and said he wasn't promising anything to make me feel better. Reggie walked toward the door and said we should go. On the drive home, he said he never realized how much his silence hurt me, that watching me stand up to his dad made him see how many times he should have stood up too. I asked why he never did, and he said maybe because that's how his family works. You don't question Dwight, you just let him say whatever he wants and move on. I told him I needed him to have my back going forward, not just in hindsight, and he said he would try, and I told him trying wasn't enough. I needed him to actually do it. 2 weeks of no contact went by. Evan told Reggie their dad kept complaining nobody could take a joke, saying I was too sensitive and Reggie needed to get his wife under control. But Evan also said he'd been noticing their dad does the same thing to their mom, makes jokes at her expense, and she just smiles and changes the subject, and now he couldn't stop seeing it. Reggie said a lot of things about his family were starting to look different. At work, my boss told me the project launch I'd been leading went better than expected, and she was impressed with how I handled pressure. It felt good to remember I was more than just someone's daughter-in-law. Reggie brought up marriage counseling over Saturday morning coffee. He said this wasn't just about his dad. It was about whether he would prioritize our marriage or his parents' comfort going forward. We found a therapist named Dr. Hanley, and Reggie told her he was raised to never question his father, and that pattern carried into our marriage, that he'd been protecting his dad's feelings instead of protecting me. She spent the session helping him see that protecting me should matter more than protecting his dad's ego, and by the time we left, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Jenny called me at work one Monday and said Dwight wouldn't apologize, but she wanted to acknowledge his comments weren't fair to me. Her voice sounded tired, and she said she'd dealt with similar treatment for 35 years, and seeing me stand up gave her something to think about. 6 weeks before Thanksgiving, she asked if we'd come to dinner, and I said only if Dwight could be respectful, that I wouldn't sit through another event where I was the punchline. Evan told Reggie that Dwight had been complaining about me to relatives trying to get people on his side, but most of the family was staying neutral, or quietly agreeing his comments were inappropriate, and some had started sharing their own stories about things Dwight said to them over the years. The narrative Dwight expected wasn't forming the way he wanted. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Reggie called and said his dad told him I could come to dinner, but there better not be any drama. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. He said he told his dad I wasn't the one who created drama, that I just stopped accepting disrespect, and Dwight hung up on him. We decided to host our own Thanksgiving instead. Evan said he'd bring wine. Karen said she'd make her famous sweet potato casserole, and we invited 2 couples from work. Thursday morning at 8:30, Jenny called asking if there was room for one more, saying she needed a break from Dwight's sulking. I said yes without hesitating. People arrived around 2. Evan with 3 bottles of wine and a grin, Karen with her casserole and her girlfriend, friends from work with appetizers and stories, and Jenny arrived last carrying a pie she'd made that morning. The house filled with voices and the smell of food, and nobody made jokes at my expense, and nobody treated me like I should be grateful just to be there. We ate and talked and laughed, and it felt easy in a way family dinners never had before. I looked around the table and realized standing up to Dwight hadn't just changed how he saw me, it gave other people permission to draw their own lines. Jenny sat next to Evan talking about a class she wanted to take, Karen was telling embarrassing stories about me from college, and Reggie kept catching my eye across the table and smiling. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't waiting for someone to make me the punchline.